はい、皆さん大変お待たせをいたしました。ちょっと時間になりましたので、開始させていただきたいと思います。私はハンガリー大使館文化部リストハンガリー文化センターのナジ・アニタと申します。本日これからパネルディスカッションを始めるんですけれども、その司会を、務めていただく先生が岡本真理さんですけれども、ハンガリー文学の研究者でいらっしゃって、大阪大学ハンガリー専攻からこちらに来てくださっていますけれども、司会を務めてくださいます。で、今日の午前中、ハンガリー文学、ハンガリーの詩人3人と、それぞれ生きてきた戦争の関係、その詩と戦争の関係についてお話をしていただきましたが、今からパネルディスカッションの司会を務めてくださいますので、ご紹介させていただきます。で、パネルディスカッションに参加される詩人と研究者の方についてこれからご紹介いたしますので、どうぞお聞きください。よろしくお願いいたします。じゃあ皆さんよろしくお願いいたします。
皆さんこんにちは。そしたらよろしくお願いいたします。先ほど私ナジ・アニタさんからご紹介いただきましたが、ちょっと午前中にハンガリー詩人と戦争ということで、いろんな時代のハンガリーの詩人がどう戦争に関わったかっていう、そういうお話をさせていただいて、で今日は本当にキプロス、アイルランドそれぞれから詩人の方に来ていただいて、それからギリシャ文学の研究の福田さんということで、私ちょっと全然門外漢なのでこの場でやることがないので、もうちょっと司会させてくださいっていう感じでお願いしています。それでちょっと簡単にちょっとお話をではちょっと座らせていただきますが、ちょっと午前中のちょっとハンガリーのね話になるんですけど、やっぱりそのハンガリーっていうのはヨーロッパの結構真ん中にあって、それだけにそのいろんな時代にいろんな政治、いろんな戦争でかき回されて、そして本当にたくさんの人が犠牲になってて、その中で詩人たちはみんなハンガリー語というものを持っていて、そのハンガリー語で詩を書くというハンガリー人詩人というアイデンティティをすごく強く持っていたんですが、いろんな戦争でいろんな形で人生を終わらせたっていう、そういう話だったんですね。で、今日はこう見てみると、そのヨーロッパの中の言ったら東の端っこ、それからヨーロッパの西の端っこ、という位置づけにねあるそこから来られた2人のね、詩人たちで、その中ヨーロッパとの関係、それから歴史戦争などとの関係というのもちょっと私もう全然わからないのでいろいろ聞いてみたいですし、それから同じようにやっぱりギリシャ先ほどのねヤシンさんの話でもとてもそのハイブリッドなギリシャ語だけではなくトルコ語だけではなくギリシャ語、英語っていうハイブリッドな、中で施策をねされてきて、でそういうのもちょっとハンガリーとは全然また違うので、もう本当私は分からないことだらけなんですけれども、皆さんのこの、聴衆代表っていう感じでいろいろと、ね、お話を質問させて、ね、いただきたいというふうに思っています。でぜひちょっと順番にご自分のあれですね、なんて詩を書くことになったきっかけとか、その詩とご自分とのね関係といったものをちょっと自己紹介ということでお話をお伺いしたいと思います。でじゃあ一番最初にパウラさんね、いかがでしょう。
Thank you, Mari. Am I on? Is it working? The mic? Great. The technology sometimes defeats me. I have a very bad effect on machinery. I thought by way of introduction and to open the ground, I would read 2 poems which more or less explain what I do and where I come from and what poetry does now. I believe poetry has a destiny in sites of conflict and in countries which are experiencing war or inherited trauma, and that poetry's destiny is to work towards integration. And I believe this from my own experience, living on a small island that has been partitioned for the last 100 years, a small island that works in 2 languages, in Irish, which is our mother tongue, and English, which is my stepmother tongue. I write in my stepmother tongue, and that stepmother tongue has all the elements of the stepmother in fairy tale. It's quite a frightening language, but it's the perfect, as one of our poets said, it's the perfect language to sell pigs in, because of course English was adopted to allow for economic advancement. Quite apart from the fact that under occupation it was illegal to speak the language or practice religion. So like the other speakers here today, we inherit incredibly complex ideas around language and identity. My work in life has been to try and turn this into this. So this poem is called Fist. If this poem, like most that I write, is a way of going back into a past I cannot live with, and by transforming that past, change the future of it, the now of my day, at the window, watching the coming and going to Merrion Square. Then, when you present your hand to me as fist, as threat, as weapon, the journey back to find the hand of the little child, the cupping of her balled fist in my own 2 adult hands, the grip of her fury, the pulse at her wrist under the thin skin, the prizing loose of each hot finger like the slow enumeration of the points of death, and the exact spot that I will have kissed, where the fate line meets the heart line, my bloody mouth arose, suddenly blooming. That journey takes all my strength and hope, just as this poem does, which I present to you now. Look, it's spread wide open in a precise gesture of giving, of welcome. Its fate clear and empty, like the sky, like the blue sky above the square. So that's Fist. We have since the spring of this year accepted 60,000 Ukrainian refugees into the country, fleeing war and carrying with them the trauma of that fate. I believe poetry and poets in the community have a destiny in integrating both the new Irish, the refugees, the economic migrants, and this new sudden insurge over the course of the year of refugees from war. In all the projects, the arts projects, there is space being made to allow the new voices in. This is, to me, the most crucial work that poetry and the community of poets can do now. And we do it with the experience of 100 years since our war of independence, 100 years since the island was partitioned. I will just read one more poem that is based around the idea of sanctuary. We have some of the universities at home are calling themselves universities of sanctuary. Some of the cities are calling themselves cities of sanctuary. Some of the villages, some of the towns, they say, we are a town of sanctuary. Come, we will help if we can. So this is my I suppose my association with that idea of sanctuary. Such an ancient idea, but it will never grow old. And this poem is a poem of sanctuary. This poem is old as the fates, the stars above spin night after night on the face of the heavens, endlessly telling each other their stories. It is newborn each day with its latest version. It says, come forward to childhood, to be cradled, to be dandled, to be held, to be lulled. It falls like rain to parched earth. It fires the seed that waits with patience for its moment to open. It says, you are worthy, deserving of love. This poem is a poem of sanctuary. It will speak the unspeakable. It promises a language to bind body to soul. Its business is truth. Its business is justice. It holds these words as a solemn promise to those shackled in hells of earthly torment. It will carry your witness, a cherished gift. It opens its doors to all who need shelter. It is humbled by your courage when you cross the threshold. It takes your hand. It unclenches your fist, finger by finger. It opens to light the lines of your future that channel your energy to make yourself whole. This poem is a zone of sanctuary. Its words are refuge from the abusers of words. If it says river, sky, star, street, it means river, sky, star, street. It means exactly what it says and says exactly what it means. It restores to words their ancient dignities. Though the world may be blind and deaf to your suffering, it hears you, it sees you, it knows that the child deep inside feels defiled with every outrage, predation or plunder, with every transgression of their bodily form. It reminds you again of your magnificent wildness, that you move in grace, a creature of nature, hardwired to survive. Its garden is boundless. Come rest in its shelter, sleep safe in its shade. Look, the day moon mirrored in its pool. Look, the seedlings in patterns, their colors radiant. This poem honors your birthright. It honors the guardians who defend and vindicate this inviolate space. This poem is a zone of sanctuary. Thank you.
力強い詩の言葉、パウロさんありがとうございました。そしたらその自己紹介といっても先ほどねお話をしていただきましたが、先ほどのちょっとポーラさんの詩を受けていかがでしょうか。ちょっと感想を交えてお願いします。
Yeah, I just told her that it's very powerful and best presentation. Sometimes rather than to talk long, you just read few sentences and everything get more clear, strongly, you feel, you think, which is something like that. And as we told before we come here, Ireland and Cyprus is kind of an underground link. Most northwestern edge of Europe and most southeastern edge of Europe, two islands divided under British colony rule, share similar destiny, sectarian wars and conflicts, interventions, and still we couldn't sort out problems completely after all this rapprochement and things, both Cyprus and Ireland. Um, for this reason, although when you look at the map, it seems we are so far away, but it's not like that. We are very close with Ireland on many things. So I really feel her poems. I feel it, you know, more than understanding, I guess.
ありがとうございます。本当にその、詩をこうして音にして力強くね、力強く読まれることによって本当にこう私たちにもこう訴えかけてくる、ねものがあるなって。やはり詩はこの紙に書いて読んでいるものではなく音に乗せて、ね、そして表現するものだなというふうに本当に強く思いました。そうですね、ちょっと福田さんの方からすいませんが、はい、
日本語で失礼します。内容についてはもちろんヤシミさんがお話しいただいたんですけれども、自分はギリシャ語の詩でしたり、フランス語も時々翻訳したりすることがあるんですけれども、もちろんヨーロッパの言語といってもギリシャ語、フランス語、英語、その他の言語で構造は日本語よりももちろん近似してはいるんですけれども、当然ですね、ヨーロッパ語というわけで近似はするんですけれども、それぞれの持っている言語の音が大きく違うなと今回思いまして、よく自分としてはギリシャ語の詩、詩音ですからギリシャ語の詩をよく YouTube で聞くのですけれども、存外英語の詩というものをこれまでちゃんと聞いたことがありませんでした。本で読んだり研究のために読んだり、また誰かと会話するために英語でも話したりすることはあるんですけれども、英語の詩に対してこの区切られた時間、皆さんと一緒にこの同じ音を味わうことができたというものが自分の中ではすごく有意義な時間だったなと感じておりまして、一人でYouTube で聞くだけじゃなくて皆さんとこの時間を共有し、またこのお読みになられる中で詩がまた一つ異なったものとしては生まれた、そのように感じ、詩って本当にヤンブとかいろいろあるんですけど、詩の規則が音の規則とかいろいろあるんですけれども、そう分析して、だからこの単語にはこの語がよくて、これ一生懸命単語調べて訳して、で苦労しながら訳すんですけれども、そんなことしなくても詩人の人が読んでくださると力強く入ってくるものがあるんだなと今とても思いました。以上です。
ありがとうございます。それで特にそのヤシンさんの先ほどのねプレゼンテーションの中で、やはりそのトルコ語が母語ではあるんですけども、その中にそのギリシャ語、英語といったもののこの文化、それから伝統っていうものはみんな入っていて、ハイブリッドな詩ができていて、そしてそれによってその戦争っていうのはその分断をするものであるけれども、詩や文学がその一つに結びつけるものとなるんだっていう、そういうふうにどこかでおっしゃっていたと思うんですけれども、それもちょっと具体的に言うと、どんなふうにしてその詩や文学というのは分断される人々っていうものを、でも言語はギリシャ語だったりトルコ語だったり違うわけですよね。どうしてそうやって言語を使う詩が文学が人を結びつけることができるんでしょうか。その辺のお話聞かせていただけますでしょうか。
This is something that Cyprus offers me. As Gavafis says, Itake offer you this voyage, nothing else. And Cyprus offers me this, how could I put, everything is turned to some certain define discourses. If I say multicultural or cosmopolitan or hybrid, what I mean, this is our life in Cyprus. We have literatures in 3 languages, modern Cypriot literatures, flourished during British colonial era in Greek language, also in English language, secondary, and Turkish language. And Cypriot people, now of course the division made new generations not be able to understand each other's language. but at least our generation, perhaps we are last generation that was born in that mixed culture. But still, I shouldn't say that young generation don't understand, because it's still they heritage from their families. And even some very young people, I am amazed sometimes they speak Greek language in Kypriaka, in dialect. So we have not only different mother tongues, so-called mother tongues, mainly Greek, Turkish and English, which are also official languages of the Republic of Cyprus. We have 3 languages, 2 languages, but also English. We also have different dialects. I said Cypriot dialect of Greek is not identical with Greece dialect. Even they call it Kypriaga means Cypriotish, actually, if we translate it, Cypriotish. And this is, well, this multiple literary identity, let's say. This doesn't mean that you have no identity. You have multiple literary and cultural identity. Cyprus is this kind of country, and all its history, always we have some different languages. Ancient time, we had Phoenician, Semitic languages mixed with Greek, ancient Greek. The medieval times, because Venetians and Lusignan Franks occupied Cyprus, we had mixed languages, text, prose writing appeared during medieval times. And the best sonnets were written by Italian origin Cypriots, that they were more open to use local Greek dialects than Orthodox population, because Orthodox population usually that time, not now, follow the church's language. Then we came to pre-modern, modern times. Again, we have languages. It makes us somehow to connect with Hellenic world, British world, and Eastern Istanbul, you know, as a metropolitan city, not only for Ottoman Turks, but Greeks as well. This is how Cyprus is, but I mean, when everyone has a nation states, we didn't have a nation states like Hungarians had, or Irish Republic had. Both communities, because of linguistic links, they try to integrate culturally their motherlands, which Greece and Turkey. So we had a different history about nation statehood, and still, but this gave me chance actually that Cyprus somehow jumped from pre-modern era to post-modern era. You know, we didn't live exactly the modern era, which is identical with nation states and so forth. So the elements of pre-modern era, which was not centralized language, centralization began all other countries according to nation states. It's not same things happen in Cyprus. And we can see, I mean, what I did in my writing is not what I supposedly do, you know, because everyone wrote in a way that poems written in London, Istanbul, and Athens. So, and I thought that, no, it's not my reality. My reality is kind of mixture, actually. Although I write basically in Istanbul Turkish, I use some metaphors in Greek, but on the other hand, perhaps I should say and finish, don't talk too much, even if I write purely Turkish, because your cultural codes, because my mother culture, if there is something mother culture, is Hellenic. So, for instance, I recently, before I left Athens, I wrote something about a friend, Dimitri. So I use in the Dimitri all metaphors of Orthodox traditions, Thessaloniki saint, and irony on it. It's purely Turkish. But you know, only Konstantinopolides, Istanbul Greek people understand and laugh because they know post-culture. Even if it's purely Turkish, actually the cultural background of it, it's Greek. For this reason, I put footnotes on it, so the mainland Turks in Istanbul could also understand this. You know, the language, even if you write in pure language, if you have another mother culture, then the poems comes differently.
ありがとうございます。ね、いわゆるその、このこう私たち近代国家ということを考えたときに、もう一つの言語を話す同じ言語を話す一つの民族がそこにいて、もう何の問題もなくその一つの言語でやり取りをし、その中で文化が生まれ文学が生まれっていうの、それをなんか当たり前のように考えてしまうっていうのがあると思います。もう特にこうやって離れた島国、日本なんかもちろんいろいろ問題はあるんですけれども、やっぱりほとんどの人は日常そう思っている。でその中で本当に今のこの何でしょう、プレモダンからもう飛び越えたようにして存在するそのキプロスの世界で、そこでその多言語の鉱脈のようなものですかね、いろんな血の流れがずっとつながって今に至っている詩人たちのこの創作っていうのは本当に全然形の違うものだなと思いました。で、その今の多言語っていうのもあるんですけれども、あとそのアイルランドは言っても英語ですよね。普段から使うのは英語ですよね。そうするとそのアイルランドの詩人としてポーラさんにとってこの二言語っていう問題はいかがなんでしょうか。どうなんでしょうか。
It's a complete enrichment to have the two languages. And an extraordinary thing is happening at the moment. When we gained independence from Britain, the early teachers wanted to revive the Irish language. But unfortunately, it was wrapped up in a kind of a jingoism that included the Catholic Church, nationalism, serious nationalism, and Irish. They came as a kind of a triad. So that actually alienated an awful lot of people from what is their mother tongue. But what's happening at the minute, and it's opening out the Irish language into a new era of flourishing, is that the new Irish, the people who come to Ireland, like we have about, I think, 150,000 Polish people living there, making their lives. We have Hungarians, we have a huge Nigerian and growing Nigerian population. We've Ghanaians, we've Kenyans, we have, as I said, the huge influx of Ukrainians. Once their children start to go into school, and they're often coming from backgrounds that are multilingual anyway, they might come to Ireland already with 3 or 4 languages. They don't have any shadow material around the Irish language. It's just another language. And that has been a kind of a liberation of Gaelic. The Irish language kind of migrated to the edge of our island, on the edge of Europe, and was preserved somewhat like a fly in amber, and is very close in structure to languages like Sanskrit, our great-great-grandmother tongues of the Indo-European language. So it contains ways of thinking, ways of looking at the world, indigenous ways. And in fact, at the moment of crisis globally, on the planet because of our misuse of our home planet. These ancient languages contains ways of thinking that may be the key to survival in the future. So a marvelous thing is happening with the new Irish. We call them the new Irish, the latest wave of migrants who have been coming in and animating our culture since the Bronze Age. It's really interesting. One of the things that connect us and connect Greek, the Greek culture, is that after the explosion of Thera, present-day Santorini, in the Bronze Age, Europe was awash with migrant tribes moving because it was a nuclear winter. For there was famine, there was displacement, it was the end of the Minoan Empire on Crete, that wonderful home place of Kazantzakis that you know so much about. And some of those migrant people came up to Ireland via Spain. So when they did a DNA rundown of the mitochondrial DNA of the Irish people now, there's a huge percentage of it is what they call the bear mother mitochondria, which comes from the Eastern Aegean, where people that were in the Bronze Age, like 1,400 before Christ, displaced tribes that came into Ireland. And we have an account of those migrations in one of our most ancient and precious manuscripts, called the Lower Gavola in Irish. It translates into English as the Book of Invasions. And it documented, firstly, in the oral culture. It wasn't written down till the 9th century AD, and was bound as one book in the about, I think, 1200 AD. This book goes back in the oral tradition to document these waves of migrants. So the current new Irish coming in, it's just another iteration, and it is the lifeblood of an island people to constantly have the newcomers. Otherwise we would stagnate and become, demented by our inbreeding. So I think it's a really exciting time, linguistically, culturally, and of course the new poetries that are coming, especially the spoken word poetry. The young poets who will stand up and just communicate directly, without pages, without the paraphernalia I carry around as an old poet. They stand up and they use influences from America, from their own home cultures. And so it's a very rich time. I see only good if we can somehow override the fascistic tendencies that are everywhere in Europe today. You know, the rise of neo-fascism. If we can defeat that, then I think that is the work ahead of us. To make Ireland a place of sanctuary and to welcome this new iteration. And I hopefully I keep my fingers crossed that the peace and our own native peace that is part of the Good Friday Agreement. It's the first generation born on the island to be born into peace. That's a marvelous thing, and it's worth fighting for. It's worth fighting for peace.
ポーラさんありがとうございます。そうですね。とてもその現代的な今のねいろんな問題絡めてやはりそのこう今ちょっと別の意味でのこのハイブリッドになっていく社会っていうものが持つ希望っていうか力でそういったものをそれによってまた例えばアイルランドに入ってきた人たちがそのアイルランドの古代の昔のそのまた文化をこう掘り出してそれにまた新たな価値を与えるそれがまた未来につながっていくっていうそういうこう多様性のあり方ですよね。すごくこう希望が持てるものだなと思いました。それからその、ね、キプロスにしてもそのもう、今までの大変なこの時代の、 歴史の流れの中で出来上がったこのハイブリッドな文化っていうものが今を作っていて、それがもう本当に一人一人の詩人なり人々の間に、今も根付いていて、それが創作につながっているっていう点で、やはり混じっていく新しいものを取り入れてどんどん複雑になっていく、プルーラルに、なっていくっていうことが持つエネルギーというものをすごく感じました。でもちょっと振り返るとね、なんか日本ってよく単一民族とかずっと島国とかいろいろ言われるんですけど、福田さんはその現代ギリシャの文学をね研究されていて、日本人としてそのギリシャ文学を見てどういうふうに感じますか？何が日本人にとっていいのかなっていうか魅力なのかって思うんですけれども、はい、
じゃあちょっと言葉も変えて少し話してみたいと思います。通訳の人しんどいかもしれませんけれども、英語で話さはって詩はつなげると言ってるんですけど、今から私のやり方はもしかしたら逆に分断のやり方かもしれませんけれども、で耳障りな方もそれこそこういう場なのでおるかもしれませんけど、それであえて効果を狙ってやらせていただきます。ギリシャ文学、なんですけれども、日本文学と大きく違うなと思った点、原文一致運動がギリシャにもありまして、で日本の原文一致運動の小説とかいろいろ読んでみますと、東京の人がやはり書いてますね。私が見るに東京のその綺麗な下町の山の手ですかの言葉で書いてあると、それで新しく国民としてこの言葉を一つきれいに作っていこうと、そういう意気込みというものは非常に感じます。でここにギリシャ人の方いらっしゃいまして、偉い方もいらっしゃるんですけれども、納得されるかどうかわからないんですけれども、私がギリシャ文学、特に日本と同じ時代ですね、西洋の文化がもっと入ってきて、これからどんなふうにギリシャっていう国作っていこうかと考えた時に、文学者たちがそれぞれの場所で文学作品を書いていくんですけれども、私の見立てではそれぞれの作家たちがそれぞれの地方の言葉でよーいドンで書き始めるんですよ。ですると私からすると翻訳するのに非常に困るんです。つまり辞書に単語がないんです。つまり口語で書くと、それぞれの話し言葉で書く、自分たちの言葉で書くとなると本当に方言で書き始めるというのが自分としてはすごく面白かったです。先ほどヤシンさんがイスタンブルのギリシャ人なら分かる表現がたくさんあって脚注つけなければならないとおっしゃっていましたけれども、例えばイスタンブルのギリシャ人の物語の小説訳したことがあるんです。そうなると会話は全部コンスタンティヌ・ポリティカっていうんですかね、ポリティカというか、そのイスタンブルのギリシャ語がたくさん混ざってまして、実際それイスタンブルのギリシャ人共同体の人のところに行って話してみるとそういう言葉が聞かれるんですね。で自分としてはそれが非常に日本の文学と比べた時に面白いなと、多様だなというのは非常に思いまして、日本でも夏目漱石の坊ちゃんとか、読んでいますと伊予弁とか混ざってくるんですけれども、おそらくそれは文学の面白みの効果以上ではないような気もするんです。例えば動詞定定てって3つ、動詞定定てって定が3つ並んでいる文章が夏目漱石の坊ちゃんの中に出てきまして、それは小金井ですかねぐらいの出身の友達に読ませてみると動詞てててって読むんですね。でいやそれね伊予弁やと動詞てっててやでと説明するわけですね。でそれ分からないんですよね、やっぱ東京の人がそれを読んだ時に。でそうなんやと思いまして、同じ日本語で書かれているから分かるかなと思うと、案外分からないことってあるんだなと。でそれとは夏目漱石の坊ちゃんだと分からないこと言っているよね、面白いよねということだと思うんですけれども、ギリシャの文学で自分が出会ったものはそういう効果の問題ではなくて、本当に自分たちがじゃあ自分の言葉で書いて自分たちを探そう、自分たちのギリシャっていうものは何なのか探そうっていうものを自分の言葉の中から、自分の持っているものの中から探そうとする勢いというものを非常に多く感じまして、ギリシャ語に誇りを持つ人たちだなと思うんですけど、それは古代のギリシャ語はもちろん誇りとして持つべき言語なんですけど、そうではなくて自分の家族、友達、周りの人々、周りにいる人々を愛しながら自分の中から出てくるものを愛するということ、その中から自分たちを探していこう、それをすごく感じた時に、自分ももっと本だけじゃなくて周りの人を見ないといけないな、もっと周りの人と話して、自分の中に出てくるものと周りの中で出てくるものがちゃんと共有できているかな、 何をこう愛するものとして探そうかなと、非常にこう考えさせられるのが、自分の見たギリシャ文学でした。
ありがとうございます。それは現代に至るまでということでしょうか。今でもそうやって
今は割と共通語で書かれている本が多いように見受けられますけれども、特に100年ぐらい前とか、20世紀前半ぐらいまでの文章はそういった傾向を強く感じました。
ありがとうございます。この日本、初めていらっしゃったかどうかわからないですけど、その日本のありようと皆さんの自分の国というか世界のありようって、結構いろいろと違って驚くことも多いと思うんですけれども、日本の皆さんにちょっとこういうことを知ってほしいとか、こういう私たちはこういう詩を書いているってちょっと短い言葉でなかなか言えないと思うんですけども、全然違うこの東アジアの島のこの日本の読者にちょっと語りかけたいことあったらちょっと最後になりますけれども。
Well, I'm not that much familiar to Japanese literature, but of course I know Japanese poetry tradition, haikus, and also Japanese writers, modern novelists. I have some ideas. We need to talk. When we talk and exchange ideas, then we see that we have lots of things common. If you just walk on Tokyo and you look around, you see that, it's so different. The architecture, the design, the people's attitude, so different. But once you sit and begin to talk, exchange messages, then you find lots of similarities. For this reason, Japan is not that much far away, I guess. Just we need more communication. Once we begin to talk, we find lots of common things. It's just a surface observation is different. Particularly in literature, we can exchange lots of ideas, lots of things. Yes. I don't know the linguistic history. I don't know how Japanese language developed. But in this area where I came from, Southeastern Europe, Eastern Mediterranean, or let's say Greek-Turkish vast region. Once it was Byzantine, then Ottoman, Eastern Rome. Monolingualism is anomaly, not multilingualism. I mean, I related with Cyprus, but you know that the first early modern Turkish literature began with Greek writing letters, which we call Karamanidika, as I told my previous talk. And I wrote one of my novels because the last Karamanidika Greek letters, Turkish novels, was written in Cyprus. So I thought many years later, since the tradition is there, I will begin to write Karamanidika novel, partly. So Turks couldn't understand because it's Greek letter. But if you give alphabet, so they can read it. So Greeks can read it, but they don't understand the meaning because now they are separated. But for instance, this is a contact languages. It's cultural things. If you talk about only linguistic, we may be close to Hungarian. This because Turkish, like Hungarian, is not Indo-European language, is Ural Altai language. So Hungary, Finnish, and Estonia one side, Turkish, Tatars, Azerbaijani, Kazakhs other side. But it's classified in the same Ural languages. When I heard Hungarian movies, I think that, oh God, this speaks my language, but I couldn't hear properly. But we are closer to Greek. Because we are in contact language, it's 1,000 years. We have lots of expressions, idiomatic words, understanding similar. My poems translated some of my poems into Hungarian, but the guy got lots of difficulties. So if it's language, if it is only linguistic matters, my poems should be translated into Hungarian easier. But one of my translator, which published my book in Greek languages, he gave interview a few years ago in Athens. He found my books in France. He bought my books from French and then from Italian, and he began to change. And he said to newspaper, I thought many months till I contacted Mehmet Yashin, that he actually originally write in Greek, and from Greek is translated into French and Italian, because so familiar expression, metaphors, and so forth. This is contact languages. And I told about Easter in Rome. Everyone knows Celaleddin Rumi, Sufism, His name Rumi means belongs to Rome. And he is the one who wrote Persian. Basically, he knows, known in the world in his Persian works. It was a literary language in those times. But actually, he wrote in Greek and in Turkish as well. And he used mixed languages, which it calls mulema. So, this tradition was exist. We destroy this amazing multilingual, even letters mix up each other because of nation states and separations, and particularly in our world, we live all this nationalist era, continuous catastrophe. Greeks and Turkey, because of immigrations, continuous wars, and it still continue endless. So there is a history. If we want to find out, we find out this background, this history. Like we can go even till ancient time if we want to find out.
パウラさんいかがですか？よかったらちょっともう時間がちょっとしかないんですけども、いかがでしょうか？聞こえますか？今のヤシンさんのお話を受けていかがでしょうか？
Well, what I'd like to say is to thank the translator who has been in my ear, and that is, I think, a real gift. I think translators are these bridges between sometimes hugely disparate languages, and we depend so much on them to carry us over from one language to another. As an Irish woman, when I was a young poet, the zeitgeist was full of Japanese poetry, not as you would imagine through the usual channels, but because it came in with rock and roll, marijuana, and other American influences, especially of the Beat generation. So we would have had that gaze from the west coast of America towards Japan, and they would have brought into English many ideas around Zen Buddhism, many ideas that were very attractive to me as a young poet. So sometimes influence comes by the strangest of routes. It's not directly. Of course, the other great river flowing into Irish English is the descendant scholars of W.B. Yeats, the scholars who looked to Yeats, who had friendships with W.B. Yeats, and who brought home to Japan Yeatsian studies, which eventually morphed into Irish studies, and we have some of the exemplary transmitters of that great lineage here with us today, Professor Mitsuko Ono and Professor Nobuaki Tochigi, who are great friends of Ireland. So I think if you think of languages as these rivers, we have many tributaries flowing back and forth between us, and that, of course, is our great nourishment. So here's to the translators.
ありがとうございます。そう思うとやっぱり文学というのは世界の潮流の中でずっと移動しながら混じり合いながら、そして私たちも知らないうちにこの21世紀のこのハイブリッドな世界のハイブリッドな文化の中にしっかりと組み込まれているといいますか、ね、そういうことなのかなというふうに感じます。ちょっともうね時間が過ぎてしまいましたが、じゃあお一人ぐらい何かね会場の方から お二人また福田さんに質問ありましたらいかがでしょうか。どうでしょう。簡単に短いものでも少しだけ時間があると思いますがいかがですか。そうでしょうか。ですか。はい。はい、じゃあありがとうございました。そしたらじゃあもう一度お二人の詩人の方、そして福田さんねの3人じゃあ大きな拍手をよろしくお願いいたします。今日はどうもありがとうございました。Thank you very much.
ありがとう。ありがとう。
Thank you.
福田さんありがとう。